Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Financial Freedom Podcast. And today's guest is Emma Michael from Aion Law Partners. Hi, Emma.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So today we're going to talk about a big topic, pre-construction contracts and deals. So we kind of touched on this a little bit in the past, but we're going to dig deeper today. We're only going to stick to pre-construction. As you know, a lot of our clients are pre-construction buyers and investors, and we've seen some deals go bad, and we've seen some deals go really good. We've seen good contracts, good builders, bad builders. So let's talk about the good, bad, and the ugly.
All right, let's do it.
Well, one thing I want to say is, that 10-day cooling period is a crucial time, right?
Yes.
It's a good time to talk to your lawyer, to have your contract reviewed, and make sure you understand the really important points, because a builder contract is about this thick.
Yeah.
And nobody except a lawyer is really trained to understand those things. Not even real estate agents. Like, we can understand some of it, but not all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you tell us, like, what happens when a client comes to your office and they bring the contract, and what is it that you're looking for? What are some of the red flags and some of the things that you look for?
Okay, well, it's that thick for a reason, because it's heavily weighted in favor of the vendor for a variety of reasons. Usually you're getting into these contracts, a lot of times they haven't even started construction, and so the builder or the vendor is looking to get into a lot of these contracts so that they can actually move the project forward, right? And so they need a certain amount of financing also, and so they have to have a certain amount of purchasers. Okay, so right off the bat, a lot of these deals are not even built yet. Okay,
right.
And you got to have a lot of flexibility as a vendor to be able to get into these kind of projects, right? So, as you know, construction, things change right off the bat. You're going to pick your sketches, you're going to pick your materials, and you should know that lots of things are subject to change. Not materially, right? They can't. If you get a 2-bedroom, you're going to get a 2-bedroom, but the location of things might change. The where you're, what height might change,
and even like the exact square footage sometimes can be off by a little bit, but not
by a little bit,
much.
as long as it's not substantial. The materials, as long as they're of equal grade, they might change. You might think that you might not have any obstructions, or another building might not be in front of you, or different things that might happen around you. You'd have no control over. So one thing is, you don't have 100% control over what you're going to get because you haven't seen it yet and it's not built yet. Okay, so that's one very basic factor. When it comes to condos, there's 2 closings, and so one of the things we always talk about is the time constraints, right? These contracts can last years. Closings on a condo. One is occupancy closing and one is final closing. So one thing we got to let everybody know is, you're going to buy it, and as soon as it's fit for occupancy, meaning municipality. So what happens is that, the physical construction of the building happens faster than the legal construction. Right? So the legal construction involves a whole lot of technical work and creating different identification numbers for every unit and descriptions and all that stuff. So physically it gets done typically faster. And that's when you have the right to occupy the unit. When you get that, you get the keys, but you're not actually the owner. Okay? So one thing you got to know is when it's fit for occupancy, you have to take it, and you're going to pay an occupancy fee. Basically, it's like rent.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it's broken down into 3 portions, and maintenance and taxes and interest owed to the vendor. So of course the vendor also wants to pay their fees, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so that's one thing that you got to know. You're not going to be the owner until we don't actually know when. So in the agreement of purchase and sale, they have the right. They'll say, well, the first tentative occupancy date is, X, right? And then they have the right to just keep extending that for basically a couple of years. So you're really in limbo as to when you're actually going to get keys. Then from there, you don't know when your final closing is. Final closing is when you have to pay up all your money. And that's important to know, because during this entire length of this contract, you're always going to have to be financially ready to close.
That's right.
And, you might get notice for final closing, really short notice before the actual date, 2-3 weeks.
I got really short notice.
Yeah.
It was like fast.
Very stressful.
Yes,
very stressful. And if you're not ready and you need more time, and as you know, like sometimes it takes time to get your mortgage together. Mm-hmm. So we're always telling people, I'm here as a lawyer, I'd say, I'm here to manage your expectations on these deals, right?
Yeah.
Because it could be very lucrative. As we know, the property value could go up from the moment you get your contract into a contract, from the moment it's ready. And so that could be very lucrative. But as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, right? So, occupancy closing, final closing, you might have very little time. And so just be always ready.
But, you know, I feel like by the time you get into occupancy, that's kind of your cue. Like that's like a hint. Like closing can come anytime soon. Just be prepared. So
100%.
if you're not prepared, really, you're just kind of
but you know what? Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it could be 6 months. Sometimes it could be, like a year. So the one thing is, during the course of this contract, don't do anything that puts you into a financial situation that you can't close your deal. It's not the vendor's problem, right?
Yeah, of course.
So don't go out and make purchases and, put yourself into a financial situation that now you're unable to make a deal. Because one of the things is that usually on occupancy, the builder wants to see you have a mortgage commitment, and they want to see you have a mortgage commitment from an institutional lender. So we've gone into some issues on this, right? Because sometimes our clients things have changed. They can't have an institutional lender, but they'll have a private mortgage.
But why do the builders care where the money's coming from?
It's more security. It's more security, right? And remember, the builders are also relying on loans to complete their contracts, right? To complete the construction. And so the banks are doing their due diligence, and they're looking at the financial viability and the security that is part of the project. And so if you have people that are on private mortgages, it just shows that their financial strength is not really strong, right? It's not really there. So it affects the financial viability of the entire project if you have that going on, right? I mean, there has been fights over this. I know. Actually, you've been part of one of these fights.
Yeah.
We had to basically fight tooth and nail to be able to close on the basis of our financing
on
contract,
a private
commitment,
lender,
on a private lender. And I, subsequent to that fight, which we thankfully won, there was another case in which the same thing happened, right? Because in the agreements of purchase and sale, they'll say that you have to have an unqualified mortgage commitment by an institutional lender. Like, unqualified is basically impossible, right? Like, it has to be qualified on something, right? On the value of the property, right? On certain things that you have to have, right, to close. So,
well, like a mortgage pre-approval has conditions. It's nothing solid.
Yeah, I know.
It's
right?
Lots of conditions to meet.
So there's been a case that was fought on that basis, and the buyers won. So that's positive, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get into fights over it. And what else can I tell you? There's a whole bunch of other things that we look at. So in terms of money adjustments, so what you have on the agreement of purchase and sale, you have your purchase price, and what people need to know is that during that 10-day cooling off period, it's important to see a lawyer, because we're going to tell you all about the timelines and the rights that you have, your obligations, but we're also going to tell you about hidden costs.
Yeah.
And those hidden costs are generally called adjustments to the purchase price, adjustments up, really. Okay, so there's all types of different things. So, taxes and, the Tarion fee, which is the warranty fee, all the different fees associated with this project are usually passed on to you. There's a few that we always want to see capped. Okay, so there's unknowns that you don't know until, remember, it could be 2-3 weeks notice before your final closing. You kind of want to have an idea of what the extras are so you can be financially ready.
Have you seen situations where those levies were not capped, development charges were not capped, and what kind of charges are we talking about? Because they can be,
I've seen like up to 25,000, 30,000.
30,000, 40,000
for one adjustment.
It's unknown, and it's not something that buyers are expecting. So I always tell people, make sure, no matter whether you work with us or with another builder or with another agent, this has to be capped. This is really, really important.
100%.
Yeah.
So the main things to cap are usually that they will cap are typically levies. So there's education levies, park levies, development levies, Section 37 of the Planning Act adjustment. Those are the main ones. Those are the big ones. And then you can throw in, the meter installations, utility meter installations, right?
Has there been a situation where somebody couldn't close because of those hidden costs that they just weren't expecting?
Listen, in my practice, there hasn't.
Okay.
Have we been in a situation where we had to it was really tight and we had to negotiate an extension and there's been extra fees involved and my clients have had a really tough time, very stressful time? Yes.
Yeah.
More than once.
Yeah.
Right, which is why the first thing we do is we talk about that and we say, we don't want you to be stressed on closing. So this can be a happy transaction for you as long as you're really well prepared. So prepare yourself now. That's the main thing, right? The other thing that we look for is the right of assignment, right? So you enter into a contract. It could be years before you're actually closing the deal. And, maybe you bought it for yourself, but maybe all of a sudden you're getting married, you're having twins, or you get a job somewhere else, and
Well,
you
a lot
gotta
of
get out.
investors make money like this too. Like this is not just
Yeah.
like life could happen. Like there are people who buy pre-construction this way. This is how they make money. They never actually get a mortgage. They just sell it on assignment.
100%.
So that is like one
but
way.
those guys know that they need assignment.
Yeah.
They know that they
Yeah,
need
they
an
need-
assignment,
yeah.
right? But for everybody else that goes in there, some people walk into a sales center and they get, thrilled by all the marketing material
Of
and the
course.
thought of having their first new home. And so they don't think like that, and they don't realize that life could change in the course of years.
Yeah.
So at least try to get the right of assignment at zero cost, right? But sometimes you can't get that, and sometimes at least you'll know the cost.
Honestly, like a lot of reputable builders, and this is one thing that we tell our clients too, like make sure you're working with a reputable builder. If you're working with an inexperienced builder, you don't want to be their guinea pig. They could cancel projects. Your money goes, like you'll get your money back, your deposit back, but
That's
what
all you'll
happens
get.
to the years
Exactly.
that was wasted?
You're not going to get interest.
You're not gonna get
Right now, the
interest,
interest is
nothing.
too low. Yeah, you're not going to get
So
anything.
it's still a loss, even though you get your money back. It's still a loss, but like don't just go with any builder just because someone tells you to or because you like the location.
Yeah.
Make sure you work with a reputable builder that has
But you know what?
the
It's hard.
financial backing.
It's very true, and there are some really reputable ones that, of course, that you want to go with. But sometimes different builders will create. It's very common to create a new corporation for every development, and you don't always know the history. So
Well, you got to look at their completed projects.
yeah, you do. You do.
You got to look
But
at
some
their
people get
track
taken, right? Like some
record.
people, and
Yeah.
I don't know. Of course, that's going to be the right advice. But sometimes there's new areas that are in more recreational type areas where we're moving up more north, more cottage country type of things, and so. You're not always finding the same builders that you'll find in metropolitan area like
Yeah.
Toronto, right?
Yeah.
So, but definitely that is
Just do your
great
homework.
advice.
Yeah,
do your homework.
do some digging at least, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back to those dates that you talked about, because there is a date at which point, like the builder owes you compensation fee, and sometimes they try to squeeze you out of that, right?
So here's
Because
the
it
thing,
happened
right?
to me, and I
Yeah.
did, and I remember you didn't
Yeah.
let me. You just you fought it.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, if you're starting to ask for different things, they'll right away try to get you to waive that
Yeah,
compensation
exactly.
fee. It's like so
Exactly.
fast. They're just waiting for you to ask for a
Exactly.
favor. So
Yeah.
and not all builders like this has just been. Look, their lawyers are working on their behalf.
Yeah.
They're working for them. They have to do what's best in their best interest, right? And you're working for buyers and investors. So I'm not hating on them for doing that. It is what it is, right?
I mean, listen, they have to try.
They got to try
know?
because they're trying to save their
So-
clients as much money as possible.
So look at it. It's like, you have a tentative occupancy date, right? And so this is the date that you think that you're going to get keys, right? And so typically people make arrangements to start moving, right? They got to give notice and all that kind of jazz. So if 90 days before that date, typically 90 days, as long as they haven't extended it past the deadline, okay? 90 days, they got to give you minimum notice that they're going to extend the deal, okay? And if they don't, then they got to compensate you. It's a maximum, it's like $150 a day, maximum 7,500.
Right.
So it's not a terrible amount it's not a huge amount for one person. You might look at it like that. But if you look at it from a builder's perspective and you start counting that amount for every single unit in the building, you start realizing that when they're late and they don't give the right notice, they could be losing a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And so something so small as, so here's one thing. When you buy a new build, you have your name on the agreement of purchase and sale. So it's really important to know, like on a resale house or property, you can, like I could buy a property and I could decide to put property in not just my name. I could put in somebody else's name. I could put in mine and somebody else's name, and I can just direct title on closing, and my lawyer will just do that. But in a new build, you can't do that. You have to do an amendment to the agreement of purchase and sale,
Right.
okay? Because there's HST issues that we can talk about in a second. So because of the HST issues, you have to do an amendment. And in doing that, you have to request it from the builder. So every time you want to request some change, it's a reason for the builder to put conditions on you, right? Whether it's a cost condition, a fee, lawyer's fees, or like this, sometimes they'll squeeze it in there.
love it.
You forego any delayed compensation if it was applicable, right? So it's something to know.
For
and
sure. Yeah.
so like when people go on, they buy new builds, and let's say it's a couple, or it's one person, but they're in a relationship, I always say get at least one the option to, before occupancy, to at least add or change purchasers, right? An amendment to add, or typically it's to add a purchaser.
To add, probably. Like,
okay.
they probably won't let you do the change, especially now. Some builders just won't let you change sometimes, but
they'll usually stipulate.
With the demand that we have, they'll just say.
But they'll usually stipulate.
No.
They'll usually say to add a family member or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Because there's also, there's like estate planning type of stuff, right? If I'm in a relationship and I want to, kind of share things,
Adding
joint
is
tenants.
fine. I think changing names is when
No,
they
but
get,
but
like,
even adding is an amendment.
Yeah.
And so, you never know at what point you are in the contract where you kind of don't want to give the upper hand, because if let's say it's the delayed compensation, then that's something that it's like, oh, you want an amendment? Sure, but you're going to forego your money.
Yeah.
Right? So I always like to have at least one option to change purchasers in there if it's a situation where, you might be in a relationship, you might not, you might need your mom on title or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's really important to know. The other thing is the HST rebate, right? So what a lot of people do is they want to buy these things for investments, right? And the agreement, so let's get it straight. Everything in Ontario is subject to HST unless there's an exemption, okay? So resale homes are exempt from HST, but not new homes.
Yeah.
So new homes have HST. So it gets a little complicated because the purchase price has HST in it. So it's already calculated in it, but there's an assumption that you as a purchaser that the HST rebate is applicable and that you're going to assign it to the builder, okay? So on properties over 450, 350 or 450, you know what, maybe 350. Can't remember off the top of my head. It caps out at 24 grand. You don't get the federal component. You just get the provincials. 24 grand, right? And in order for you, so in the agreement of purchase and sale, it says that you are saying that you're going to occupy this as your primary residence. You or a direct blood relative intend to occupy as your primary residence, that you will therefore be qualified for the HST rebate, that you acknowledge that the price has that amount deducted. And if you're not eligible, then you're going to have to pay that on closing. That's an extra $24,000, right? So that could be a significant amount on top of all the adjustments that we've talked about. So why is that important? Because if you plan to rent it out, you're not going to qualify.
During occupancy. Yeah.
And the first occupancy determines the qualification, okay? So if you are a direct relative of every purchaser on the agreement of purchase and sale, so if me and you buy it and only I'm going to live in it, I'm not your blood relative. So we don't qualify, right? It has to be everybody. Either everybody's in or it's a blood relative of everybody on there. So investors you're looking at just being disqualified. Then you have to be the first occupant and all the way through final closing, which again, we talked about, we don't actually know when that is actually going to be, right? And so that's important to know.
But if you rented, so first of all, you need to have, that's one of the things you need to have in your contract, is the right to lease during occupancy, if in fact you are planning to do that. So what happens in a case where somebody does rent it out during occupancy?
Okay, so first of all, when you have that amendment, you are basically signaling to the vendor that you don't qualify. So they can choose, even if you change your mind later, they could choose technically to just say, you know what, you don't qualify.
The right to lease?
No. So let's say you put an amendment.
So
and you
a
say
lot
the right
of contracts
to lease,
have
right?
that now.
Yeah.
They automatically have it.
I'm just saying because everything in these contracts are up to the builder's discretion, the vendor's discretion, right? Which can be completely arbitrary. So what I'm saying to you is this: when I say I want the right to lease, I'm basically signaling to the vendor that I'm not going to qualify for the HST rebate because I'm already contemplating renting it out.
Okay.
Right? So when it comes to the time to actually take occupancy, if they don't want to in any way, because the CRA is, pretty onerous, right? You don't want to fight the CRA. If they in any way think that it's a risk to them, especially if you've already showed them an intention to want to lease it out, even if you tell them that you're going to occupy it, they might say, no, you know what? We're not even going to take the risk. You're going to have to apply for the HST rebate on your own and pay us the 24 grand on closing. So that 24 grand could be a hefty fee for you.
Okay. So for people who have not gone through this process, now they pay the 24K. How do they get that money back?
Okay, so then there's a different application, okay? So there's a different application to get the rebate back. It's called the New Housing Rental Rebate Application. Okay.
And your office does that for
Yeah, of
buyers
course,
at
of course.
that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to do it after final closing and within 2 years.
Right.
Okay. And the thing is that the first occupant has to have been the tenant, and there has to have been an intention to stay for a year. So none of the short-term rental stuff.
Right.
Right?
1 year lease,
1 year lease.
long term.
Long term, you paid the rebate amount on closing, so you were forced to pay it.
Yeah.
And then you apply to the CRA, and then you can get it back.
And how long does it take to get back?
That's a great question. That's changing all the
Because
time.
of COVID.
Because
So
of COVID.
the
It used to be
pandemic-
like a couple months.
Yeah.
And now,
well, I
like,
remember
it's forever.
we actually did get it back in a couple of months. It was really fast.
Yeah.
It was a really fast process. So right now you're saying
Long
the
time.
pandemic has
Yeah.
delayed things.
Delayed everything
quite
with
a bit.
CRA. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that
Oh, yeah.
happening. But they get it back. They get it back.
They get
so
it
if
back.
investors
They get it back.
are looking to lease it, which a lot of them are, like honestly, a lot of these downtown condos, they're bought by investors. But they will get that money back as long as
$350K, by
as
the way.
long as the tenant is going to be in there
Yeah.
for
So
long term.
here's another nuance.
Until
So-
after closing,
Yeah, but
at
so
least.
let's say you buy a property under 300,000, okay? Under 350,000. That's the limit. Remember I said there's a provincial component and a federal component. And so if you bought it from the builder, and when the agreement of purchase and sale says it's a lower amount, but then at the time of closing, the fair market value has gone up, and you're going for the rental rebate application, then you have to declare the fair market value. And if the fair market value is above 350, then you're no longer going to be eligible for the federal component.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, just a little nuances to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Okay.
What else?
Okay, that's good to know. Now I want to talk about a situation that's we actually had this problem at our office. I want to talk about some maybe unusual cases that happened. So we had a mutual client. They wanted to sell their property as an assignment sale, and there's some rules around that. You can't just, although they give you that right to sell, but there are some conditions that you need to fulfill.
No advertising.
So
right?
well, it depends,
No
right?
listing.
Like unless you get it in writing.
Of course.
From the
So
builder.
the agreement will say you're not allowed to.
Well, first of
list.
all, the building has to be 85% to 90% sold because the builder is not going to compete with you on the open market.
Yeah.
That's number one. That's pretty much the most important one. And then you actually have
It could
to have
fluctuate. It
something.
doesn't always have to be 85%. It could be 90% depending on the contract.
90%.
Right.
Most of the ones I've seen are 90%, but
Okay.
there was one that we were working with was 85. Anyways, that
Okay.
can change. That's something that you will have to tell the clients on during their 10-day cooling period. That's something they would have to know that, right?
Yeah.
Right now it's so crazy that like buildings are selling 100% within less than a year. So but let's assume that somebody wants to sell their property as an assignment. They want to go on MLS. You can't just list on MLS.
Yeah.
You got to get it in writing. And if you don't get it in writing, now it's like the builder's lawyer can pretty much ask for anything under the sun.
Pretty
if
much.
they
Or
want
they
to.
could just deem you to be in default if they really wanted to.
Yeah.
The language
Yeah.
is in there in the contract that says
Yeah.
that. It says that you're not going to list for sale, for lease, for assignment. You're not going to market the property on any of these listing sites so without the prior written consent.
Yeah.
Right? And then sometimes they stipulate the consent won't be given unless these things have happened. Maybe it's a percentage of the property that's been sold. Or whatever. But and some contracts will actually have like an actual penalty amount in there. Very rare I've seen them, but I've seen them where it says, if they catch you at any point in time listing, then automatic, they could be like, $3,000 charge as a penalty.
I prefer that over just anything can happen, right?
I mean, that's true. That's true. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you just get charged that and you're let off the hook. It's that plus the doors
Plus
open to
anything
deeming
else,
you to be
yeah.
in default.
Yeah.
Right?
So people have to be careful, right?
Yeah.
Because again, like this is not to hate on builders, and because builders also go through a lot. They're dealing with a lot of crap. They're dealing with building permits. Like the city has so many restrictions and permits are so expensive and they delay it so long. Like just dealing with the city itself is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So that in of itself, like they've had to go through a lot of crap to have to put all of these clauses and conditions in their contracts, right? So let's talk about what a buyer can do to prevent themselves from going on their radar, Because once you're on their radar, like, it's
I
kind
mean,
of hard to
listen,
get
from my
off.
perspective, I'm always going to say we need to request consent.
Yeah.
Right? I know from an agent's perspective, you guys have exclusive ways to market. You have different ways to kind of find buyers without it actually being listed.
Yeah.
That's on you guys. And a lot of times, people come to me, they've already found somebody.
Yeah.
Right? And they've already said, listen, I already have a buyer and I just need to request an assignment. Right? So then we ask the builder to, give us the right to assign the contract, and then they'll stipulate some conditions, right?
Right.
So in that one circumstance, we didn't have the right of assignment automatically in there. We didn't, and I think the client had put the property up, and so it really aggravated the vendor.
And they were not a very good builder.
No.
I remember they were just one of the worst builders I actually dealt with.
Yeah. And like as an example, they were trying to squeeze a portion of the profits. They said they wanted a percentage.
Yeah.
Right, which is not as typical. That was a very rare one.
Was
they
harsh.
They saw the property went up and they wanted a piece of the action. Right? And so
those lawyers were just hungry. They were just
hungry.
like, I'm waiting. I'm hungry.
Oh man.
Give me some money.
They fought over everything. For sure.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. But, that could happen with any builder, but most of the time it's going to happen with those not so good builders, right?
Yeah, usually the smaller ones. Usually the bigger guys are, they're pretty open, as long as you're not doing anything drastically against the contract.
Yeah. So what happens like if somebody has to extend? Like, as you said, things happen. You buy a property today, it's not going to close for another 5 years. Like, I don't know. My life has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. I don't know about you. So things can happen. How do you deal with extensions? Like, what have you kind of seen from the builder side? Let's talk about the good ones.
So listen, I have found that over the last 10 years, things have gotten a little easier. Back, I want to say, back 10 years ago, I mean, and not as far back as 10 years ago as well, but it was like you had to close. You might get 1 day, maybe 1 day, and even then you have to pay extra. Now, some of the contracts will say, listen, we'll give you 1 day extra, right? Like you can, and then maybe there'll be a stipulated fee in there. For some circumstances, we have builders that are or vendors that are being a little bit more open to being flexible. Maybe but generally speaking, it'll be a fee. Generally speaking, you're talking about money, right? I mean, you got to think about it. The builder, the vendor is paying interest on their construction loans.
Yeah.
Right? Every day that you don't pay them, they got to pay someone else. Right? And then on top of that, it's every day that you don't pay, we got to extend all this, the legal process, and it's time. So it's just going to be cost.
Yeah.
It's cost, right?
Yeah.
So, generally speaking, we just have to request, and, it's a matter of explaining the circumstances, and sometimes sometimes you get a good builder, sometimes you don't. But it's just a matter of paying up.
You got to work with an agent that has access to platinum, access to good builders.
And listen, you got to be well prepared.
Yeah.
You got to, be dealing with a good lawyer too. That we also we have to fight for you guys, and we do that.
Oh, working with a good builder with a good lawyer is crucial. Nobody understands this. You don't need a really good lawyer if things are going well.
Yeah, of course.
It's when things go to shit that you have to realize, oh my God, I wish I hired a good lawyer because this lawyer doesn't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I highly, highly suggest people stay away from, jack of all trade lawyers. Work with a lawyer that specifically works with real estate, but especially with pre-construction, a lawyer that has experience, because pre-construction contracts are really different than resale.
Yeah.
Even selling pre-construction is really different. So that brings me to one of my last points. Why don't we talk to some of the real estate agents? Let's say they're starting to work on pre-construction. What advice do you have for them in terms of how to, first of all, make sure that the contracts or what they're asking for, what they're negotiating in these deals? Sometimes we don't have, that much room for negotiating, but you're working with a builder, you want to make sure your clients are protected. What are some things to look for and make sure that their clients have on the contract negotiated before it gets to your table?
Well, here's the thing. I feel like if you want to have a happy buyer, the more that you manage those expectations before it gets to me, to the lawyer, then the better, right? So one is explain the idea of adjustments. explain the idea of occupancy versus final closing. Explain
Adjustments as in development fees and those
development
cap
fees, levies,
Okay.
all that. The whole list,
Yeah.
right? In the Tarion, there's a schedule, and there's a part of that schedule that actually forces them, the vendor, to stipulate what are the known extras, adjustments, and what are the unknown ones, right? So get to know that, right? Prepare your buyer. Get limits on them. Get limits on them. Get the right of assignment.
So right to sell before closing. Okay.
Right to sell before closing, which is the right of assignment.
Yeah.
The right to lease.
Yeah.
Okay. If you
during
just
occupancy.
understand the HST rebate and explain it.
Okay.
To a certain measure. I mean, it's my job to do that. But the more that we work as a team, the better your buyer feels.
Well,
right?
There's no surprises.
Exactly. Yeah. Adjustments, right? Explain that limitations on the adjustments. And then, like I said, try to get the right to amend the agreement of purchase sale to add a purchaser, for example, if needed, add or delete. And I mean, those are my main points. Okay. Those are my main points. And then, and I, just work with a good lawyer, because at least we can talk about it. I've done a lot of new build homes, and I've seen a lot of different things that can go wrong or that can get people upset. Little nuances, like tiny little ones, right? Like, for example, you can get something with a parking space, but you don't know where your parking space is going to be. And they can give you a compact car one. What if you have a truck, right? And it's up to the vendor's discretion. I had that situation.
Wow.
And it was a big aching deal to negotiate our way out of the compact car spot, because my client didn't have a compact car, right?
See, that's so silly. Like, why would the builder just assume that you have a compact car?
Well, what it is? It's like, you go out with plans, and then when you actually get down to it, and actually construction changes, and all of a sudden you thought you had a little bit more space, but you didn't, because you have to do, this on this side or whatever, right? You start limiting your capacity, but you already sold the spots. So in Toronto, look how little space we have left, right?
And so downtown builders are not even giving parking anymore. So is that something to ask for before?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There are situations where sometimes you buy like a combo parking locker. So sometimes they have that where the parking and the locker is like actually beside each other, but they're now attached, so they're not movable. So you can't sell one without the other, as an example. Just understand these concepts, right? Sometimes you have people that are buying new home townhomes or new homes, and they want a separate entrance. Okay, I've had this situation, and the builder couldn't do it. So if you look in the contract, it says, listen, if we can't do it, you're not going to get your deposit back. You're not out of the deal. We're just going to give you a credit. It could be a credit as low as $9,000, $10,000, right? But meanwhile, having a basement apartment or the ability to have that separate entrance for you would have had a much higher value. Now you're still stuck in the contract, right? So know these things, right? Just know these things, understand the timelines, but those are the main negotiating points for me that I would say, get on top of.
And is there anything they should know about assignment sales? Because a lot of our clients are getting into these deals with the intention of selling before closing. Is there like anything they should know about the assignment sale? Like, it's a little different than
So so we talked about the HST and the occupancy and whatnot. So whenever you're selling within occupancy, you got to remember, has it been occupied? You want to make a statement that it hasn't been occupied, right? Or that, they're eligible for the HST rebate, and that's going to carry on to the assignee, right? And you just want to make sure that happens, because you don't want the assignee to be in a situation where now they don't get that. You want to, then it's more of a negotiating the payments, right? Because a lot of, a seller wants their money back all at once. They want their deposit back, they want their profit back. But a buyer might be relying on a mortgage to get a lot of that funding back. And so a lot of that is a matter of negotiation. How much do you get when, the assignment deal goes firm, right? Because then you could be even looking at 3 closings, really, right? You could be looking at an assignment closing where it's like, hey, we're just exchanging the contract. I'm going to give you a chunk of cash. Then we could be looking at occupancy closing, right, which maybe is just for the assignee, the person who just bought it, that just has to close an occupancy, and then there's final closing, and maybe that's when the rest of the money or the profit comes. So that's just a matter of negotiating. Of course, for a seller, you want to get as much profit and as much of the money out of the deal before final closing. For a buyer, you're going to want to extend it more to the final closing, so that you can rely on financing and you can buy some time.
Right.
So things to know,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Okay. Emma has been such a huge part of our pre-construction platform. She's helped so many of our clients, so it's definitely been a ride. We've learned a lot, and we'll talk more about this. If any of you guys want specific things covered or any questions, just let us know. We're going to have her contact information on the screen if you guys want to reach out. And remember, if you like this podcast and you think somebody would enjoy it, share it, click the like button, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Bye.